Hello, my name is Lauren Goodrich, and I am Stratfor Senior Eurasia Analyst. I'm joined today by Paul Floyd, Stratfor's military analyst. Paul, we're one day past Crimea formally joining Russia, but the big concern out of the Ukrainian government now is Russia going to try to now take eastern Ukraine? They already won Crimea. Are they now going to take it a step further and militarily invade eastern Ukraine? But this is militarily a nightmare for Russia, isn't it?
In many ways, yes. So the Ukrainian military is very weak compared to the Russian military. In fact, anecdotally, from the pictures we've seen, a lot of the Ukrainian forces are kind of badly equipped. A lot of their equipment's mothballed. They're using very old Soviet-era stuff. But that being said, Russia also in itself is has been reforming its military and is definitely a regional powerhouse, but embarking on an invasion into another country is a huge, costly affair, and Ukraine's large. It's not Georgia. It's not Georgia, and specifically, it's not a small region within Georgia. So the farther they would want to incur or make this invasion into the Ukraine would take that exponentially more resources to do so. And while the Ukrainian military might not necessarily be up to a peer competitor with the Russian military, they can make it very painful for them, especially if the population starts to kind of become anti-Russian or less pro-Russian and starts, basically an insurgency.
The population in eastern Ukraine may be pro-Russian at this moment, may be talking about annexation themselves, but once you have Russian tanks roll down your street, you're not so pro-Russian anymore, especially if you economically disrupt the eastern part of Ukraine. That would devastate Ukraine altogether, seeing how majority of the industry inside of Ukraine's in the east.
Right.
And so if you wipe that out economically with a military invasion, the population's not going to be so friendly to that. And to be honest with you, the Russian population in western Russia that borders that eastern section of Ukraine, they're so economically integrated that any disruption out of Ukraine will ripple across the Russian economy as well.
Absolutely, and Russia has taken into calculation any kind of invasion. You can't do a clean invasion. You should never assume that you can, and you have to assume that either through sabotage by the Ukrainians themselves or offensive action, that much of this infrastructure will be destroyed. And so it could be self-defeating in the sense of trying to keep what it wants of Ukraine.
Now that Crimea is a part of Russia, there's many former Soviet states that are also really concerned about, is Russia going to invade us next? It's not just about eastern Ukraine, but the other former Soviet states. Georgia was an easy one for Russia because South Ossetia and Abkhazia border Russia. Crimea was easy because their military was already there. But the Baltic states are the ones who are being very vocal at this moment as far as a concern for invasion.
And that's understandable, and there's a historical precedent for it. But I would say that the big single difference that I can point to here more than anything else is the fact that the Baltic states are in NATO. And while arguably NATO has weakened compared to what it used to be and has lost some strategic focus, Russian tanks rolling into NATO territory is exactly why NATO was built, a defensive situation for the defensive union in this sense. And this is something that could sharply snap it back into focus and have severe consequences for Russia in the long run. So militarily, Russia, geographically and military could roll through the Baltics or seriously kind of have this overt military action in the Baltics in theory. But in many ways, the backlash, this would galvanize NATO, and they'll be outmatched by NATO as a whole that's galvanized and working together by far.
And I would say the one wild card region that we still need to keep an eye on is Transnistria, right. Moldova's secessionist region. Russian military's already there, but the problem is that Moldova is still pretty far away from Russia compared to Ukraine.
Right. I would say that the biggest problem for Russia from a military point of view there, in that military equation, is the fact that it doesn't have right now an ally in Ukraine, and so it's basically having to project force over some kind of gap. And Russia's ability to do that as well as it used to is limited. So trying to have some kind of serious engagement that, again, is on the doorstep of NATO hopping over territory is going to be a lot more difficult for them. So I would not see them to try to overtly, try to take that as much as everything that they've been doing has been easy, as you said, or has been kind of in place for them already and has been bordering them and geographically makes sense for them.
Very important information. Thank you, Paul. For more information, go to stratfor.com.